Devil's Third, the other worst game on the Wii U. Devil's Third was announced in 2010 with THQ as its publisher, and then THQ went bankrupt. So they found a Korean publisher to release the game. And then that publisher went bankrupt. And then the game slipped into development hell because the creator of the game's original engine also went bankrupt. Devil's Third was eventually picked up by Nintendo, who wanted an online shooter to bolster the Wii U, and when Nintendo learned that the game sucked, even they tried to bail on publishing it. Nintendo only agreed to release the game after a concentrated backlash. Devil's Third is the brainchild of Tomonobu Itagaki, the producer and sometimes director of Dead or Alive and Ninja Gaiden, and Devil's Third was the debut of Itagaki's new studio, Valhalla. The dude had too big a profile to bury his solo debut, and like every other company associated with Devil's Third, Valhalla went under a year later, only releasing one other game, a Japanese game called,
Well, I'm not even going to attempt that.
So as we dig into the gigantic misfire that is Devil's Third, keep in mind, people asked for this. The game follows Ivan, a Vin Diesel wannabe who's introduced playing rock music, always wears sunglasses, and is covered in tattoos because he's extreme! Ivan is a reformed terrorist who now works as a secret agent, and he's called into action to battle his old terrorist outfit, the Sod. No, really, the terrorists are called Sod, so depending on what flavor of English you speak, the planet is either under threat from dirt or annoying people. Sod has invaded, well, the Earth, and Ivan is tasked with stopping them before they take over the world. Now, ostensibly, the big premise behind Devil's Third is that it has a hybrid combat system that combines hack-and-slash gameplay with a third-person shooter, having you switch between melee combat and gunplay on command to battle a wide variety of enemies. In melee combat, you have combos of weak and heavy attacks with heavy moves kind of working as finishers, you have a dodge roll that's kind of clunky and sluggish, a throw-your-weapon attack that I never use because that's what the guns are for, and a block that seems to do pretty much nothing. Seriously, every time I tried to block, my weapon just got ripped out of my hands after a single hit. I swear the only use the block has is to protect you from the swarms of bats that blow through and insta-kill you at arbitrary points in each level for no damn reason. If you land enough hits in melee combat, you charge up a rage mode called Mbaku, and what this power is or why Ivan has it are never explained. In armed combat, your guns don't do shit unless you iron sight aim every shot, you carry two guns at once, most of the weapons are generic machine guns, and if the game feels like working right, you automatically take cover behind any object that you run into. Unlike Ride to Hell Retribution, which tried to have this same hybrid system, the melee and gun combat use completely different buttons, so it's easy to switch fighting styles on command. But here's the biggest head-scratching thing about the game. I'd estimate that at least 95% of the fights are shootouts. The overwhelming vast majority of the enemies shoot at you from behind cover. Most of the game is dull, bog standard cover-based shooting encounters that could have been pulled out of any generic COD wannabe modern military shooter. There are very few hack-and-slash fights in the game. The first level past the tutorial, I could probably count the number of melee enemies on one hand, and most levels have just one token melee brawl, if that. The few times the game tries to combine melee and shooter combat into a single encounter, it's a complete disaster. You'll be in the middle of shooting a dude behind cover, and the melee enemy will just ambush you from off screen and kill you instantly. Melee enemies will charge in a straight line in the middle of a gunfight so you can mow them down without a struggle. One level has several ninja enemies who will switch between swords and guns on the fly. You can't hack and slash the melee enemies without out-of-reach armed goons ripping you to shreds, and you can't shoot the armed enemies because while you're standing in place lining up shots, the melee dudes will swarm and kill you. The game's central premise falls flat on its face because one of its combat systems is barely used, and the few times the game tries to creatively mix gameplay styles, it just comes out unplayable. Not helping things is the fact that both of the combat systems suck nards. Regardless of how you set the camera sensitivity, the iron sight aiming feels really stiff. The cursor only seems to move one of two speeds, and neither is slow enough for precise aiming. Plus, the game doesn't respond to slight motions on the right stick when aiming, so it's awkward trying to guess how far you need to move the stick to line up shots. It's friggin' obnoxious how often you get ambushed by enemies with rocket launchers who keep exploding you and knocking you out of iron sight aiming, and I hate the enemies with shields that you have to be crazy precise to hit. The shooting action is just slow-paced, super tedious, and it controls like shit, and this tedious crap makes up the bulk of the gameplay. At the very least, you get plenty of ammo, and there are a few cool weapons, like frequent rocket launchers and a few flamethrowers. The melee combat doesn't have these positives. Barring the tutorial, every single melee enemy in the game has a fast attack combo that has practically zero wind-up or telegraph, and wipes out most of your health in one hit. You'll be wailing on an enemy, and in a split second between attacks, presto! Most of your life's gone, and you desperately dodge away to try and heal up. And trying to fight groups, forget it. Any single glancing hit leaves you at death's door, so go into a group of enemies who can cumulatively kill you by brushing up against you twice, and you have no sweeping or area attacks for crowd control. Groups of melee enemies will curb stomp you. Shit, normal individual enemies will curb stomp you unless you dodge non-stop. Oh, and that M'Baku Rage mode only seems to increase your damage output. It doesn't improve your health or give you better attacks, so the Rage mode doesn't do shit to help you. Pretty much every group of melee enemies, I had to find some way to cheese my way through the fight because the hack-and-slash combat is so hideously unbalanced. I honestly had way better luck using guns on melee goons. The guns let you score kills way faster, they keep you out of range of enemy attacks, and the game's aggressive aim assist makes it easy to land point-and-blank hits. I feel it speaks volumes that there's barely any melee combat in the game, and I still went out of my way to avoid it whenever possible. Also, for literally no reason that is ever explained, Ivan carries a katana the entire game. There are alternate melee weapons, but I never found one that seemed any better than the default. The game runs terribly, with frequent, obvious frame rate sputters in both levels and cutscenes. There are loads of muddy textures and some truly butt-ugly character models. The enemy AI is incredibly stupid, sometimes just zoning out and standing out in the open, and dropped guns will often glitch and vanish as soon as they hit the ground, and this can happen to rocket launchers that you needed for an objective. The game's bosses are completely infuriating. Your attacks just phase right through them with no feedback to let you know what to do, and they can also wipe out your health in an instant with no wind-up. Some bosses also have one-hit kill attacks to where a single grazing hit kills you instantly. Just nothing about the game is fun. The shooting is tedious. The combat is broken. It's an alternating, boring, and frustrating slog to play through. Several people have told me the game is so bad that you can laugh at it, describing it as one of those so bad it's good games, but the combat being based in fake difficulty with a minuscule health bar and cheap-ass enemies doesn't have me laughing. Maybe people were talking about the game's story when they said that you could laugh at it. At the very least, maybe the story won't piss me off as much as the gameplay. The game begins with Sod blowing up a few satellites in orbit over the Earth, sending debris careening through the atmosphere and taking out every other satellite that's in orbit. Ivan's secret government agency activates him to fight Sod, but first Ivan has to fight his way through Guantanamo Bay because keeping the valuable agent somewhere that he can be deployed quickly makes too much sense. Sod's first target is the Panama Canal to hamper U.S. naval deployment, so Ivan is sent in with a group of flat, boring, completely interchangeable, muddy texture Marines with no personality to stop the attack. Ivan's boss explains that the satellite explosions have somehow created a global EMP that's knocked out all electronics and technology on the planet. Yeah, all except for the exosuits that the Marines wear, the computers that give you briefings, Ivan's scan visor sunglasses, the multitude of well-lit levels, the helicopters, the drones, and literally every single piece of technology that both sides use the entire game. This level is insanely boring. It's just one tedious, slow-paced, cover-based shooting encounter after another with bog-standard enemies and bog-standard weapons. This level could have been pulled from any poor man's COD clone back when those were all the rage. It doesn't help the boredom that through this entire level your allies banter an endless litany of generic military speak that doesn't mean anything until your ears glaze over.
This route's no good. We go to the hotel. This is Echo 3. Anybody copy? Need assistance. Getting hot in here.
Want to help us? Smoke the targets here.
Grip the chatter. Stay on them.
We're at Fox leaders. Fox leaders, KIA.
Hurry to the rendezvous point. Head for the square.
Hey, Bravo 1. Action confirmed.
Bravo team, repelling in.
Roger, Bravo 1. Deploy to the west side of the square after landing.
You know, I'd be fine with dead air. At some point, you jackasses are just talking to hear yourselves talk. During this level, we get a flashback to Ivan's time in Sod. Ivan was a member of a small group of elite Sods until he quit because he didn't realize that terrorist groups kill innocent people.
Those kids in the hospital, what are they, terrorists? Kill them where they're young, cabron.
Hey, what gives you guys? I thought this terrorist organization was on the up and up. Ivan's leader was a guy named Big Mouse. Why the hell a terrorist leader has such a stupid name as Big Mouse is beyond me, but you fight Big Mouse at the end of the first level. Alright, Big Mouse is charging into close range. I'll finally get a good melee. What the shit? He just curb stomps you in 1 or 2 hits. Fine, I'll do it again. Why do I even have this damn sword? Well, then Big Mouse injects himself with some kind of serum and just hulks out somehow, so you do get an actual melee fight and you kill him.
You had ideals once. You had honor. Nothing more than a Yankee errand boy.
Yeah, that's not how you spell Yankee. Yan Kui? Isn't that a ninja clan from Mortal Kombat or something? The next level says SOD is blocking trade routes to create a global food crisis, which implies that this terrorist organization somehow has enough warships and resources to blockade the Earth. Ivan and his red shirts are sent to take down SOD's leadership, and they track a bad guy to an island, so you spend another 40 minutes walking through a generic gray military-themed area while generic military dialogue drones on in your ear.
We'll deal with it later. Move!
Incoming hostile! Defend our position!
How is a game with terrorist ninjas so damn boring?
Shit!
This level has you scan rooms for bombs to shoot them before they can kill you. Granted, you don't know which rooms you have to scan, so you just enter a random room and blow up. This level also introduces armored enemies, which mow you down with chain gun fire while you try to line up headshots, requiring you to be out in the open, soaking up bullets to kill them. The boss of level 3 is another of Ivan's former teammates, this shirtless African guy.
Is this what you've become, Ivan? I taught you to fight with your hands!
This is a two-way street game. You want me to actually use the melee combat, you have to actually have some, and you have to make it suck less. Shirtless African guy bitches that he thinks America exploits starving third world countries. The guy trying to create a global food crisis is angry at a country for ignoring a food crisis.
Are you deaf to the cries of the starving?
Are you deaf to the cries of the pot calling the kettle black? This fight is friggin' annoying. African guy shrugs off most of your attacks, has a lot of long mobile combat animations and instantaneous range attacks that are damn hard to avoid, and he has one-hit kill attacks with no wind-up or telegraph. Doing anything other than run away from him constantly gets you insta-killed. I only beat him by dashing around desperately trying to dodge attacks, trying one attack at a time until I landed enough hits from pure luck to wear him down. I keep second-guessing myself if the game's combat is really this broken or if I just royally suck at it. The two are not mutually exclusive, but I really did try everything to put this guy down, and nothing but pot-shotting him to death worked. There are several major problems with Devil's Third's plot, but one of the biggest is that the game couldn't decide on a tone. The script is full of silly shit, between terrorists so over-equipped they put Cobra to shame, a tutorial stage with a prison breakout straight out of Guardians of the Galaxy, villains with anime powers and corny melodramatic monologues, sci-fi enemies that explode in gore when killed, and a main character who's a scientific experiment to cram every cool guy stereotype into one person. You've got all this cartoony shit happening in a realistic military shooter. You spent the entire game in a squad of generic Marines using ordinary rifles and boring cover tactics to shoot generic terrorists in an endless succession of gray, realistic environments. Everybody's super serious. It never smiles or cracks a joke. The dialogue is all serious military speak. Everything is slow-paced and low energy. Even the music goes for a dramatic, serious tone and is so low-key you barely even notice the game has music. This game feels like it was written by somebody who was making No More Heroes and then directed by a guy who was making Battlefield. The game takes itself so deathly seriously that the few times the gray realism shooter is interrupted by posturing cartoon characters, it just feels stupid instead of fun. This roided out angry African dude with spirit powers would fit right in something like Mad World or Fist of the North Star, but they drop him into a gritty wannabe Gears of War and it just doesn't work. I don't know if the game was focus tested to death into being a gray military shooter or if the direction changed mid-development hell or if this is just Itagaki style and I don't know anything about the guy, but the game is a patchwork mess and it's so mundane that it's not the fun kind of mess. Level 4, Ivan just gets a call out of nowhere to go to a hospital, so you cover-base shoot your way through a gray city-themed corridor. And then you fight zombies. Yeah, this gray military shooter just decided to become Resident Evil for half a stage. Go figure, the zombies have quick melee combos and they attack you in groups to where 2 glancing hits with a nanoseconds telegraph each kills you. Luckily, this game gives you a flamethrower and your ammo refills when you die, so I just lit all the broken-ass zombies on fire to skip fighting them entirely. One of the enemy models, I think, is supposed to look like a mutated gorilla, but his head is just one static model that has no animation, so he looks like he's wearing a cheap-ass Halloween mask. At the end of the hospital, you learn that Sod has a super soldier serum, which we already knew. So thanks for wasting 40 minutes of time. Next, Ivan just gets a call out of nowhere to go to a Chinese village, which is another linear corridor. This is where you fight the broken-ass ninjas that make you hate life, and at the end of the level they spawn so many ninjas at once that the frame rate sputters to PowerPoint. At the end of the Chinese village, you fight Jane Doe, the last member of Ivan's old unit. Jane has a huge rack and strips to her underwear to fight you because did I mention that Itagaki used to head up Team Ninja? After another round of all my attacks just phase through her, so what the hell do I do? Jane tells you to go to a prison and then Ivan cuts her eyes out. Because killing a woman terrorist would somehow be sexist, but establishing that she has super cancer with tumors that swell up her boobs and leaving her writhing and screaming in pain is A-okay.
Is it sexist to hit you? Is it more sexist to not hit you? I mean, the line gets real blurry.
Oh, I forgot to mention, instead of giving you hints, all of the loading screens give you background information about the characters and tidbits of lore. Big Mouse is trained in the Marine Martial Arts program for close-range combat. Well, gee, that's interesting. Granted, Big Mouse has been dead for over 2 hours, so that information has nothing to do with anything, but sure. Let's go with interesting. So for level 6, we bumble around another gray industrial area fighting generic dudes with guns while nothing happens. Instead of a boss, you fight 2 armored guys with melee weapons. They're massive bullet sponges, they constantly charge you so your guns don't work, and if you try to melee attack one of them, they immediately land a counterattack that damn near kills you instantly. I have no friggin' clue how you fight them. So I just dumped rockets and grenades on the bastards to kill them both without a fight and flipped several game designers the bird on my way out. You rescue a prisoner named Dr. Maida. Maida explains that he discovered Rhenium X, a super magic impenetrable metal that's used for all military vehicles. Now, I've been smoking military vehicles with rockets and Gatling guns all game, so either Rhenium X really sucks or the rest of the game completely forgot about this cutscene. Maida explains that vibranium was discovered on this island and world peace broke out as America, Russia, and Japan made a treaty to split the rhenium, and this is all completely useless background information that has zero bearing on the plot and never comes up again. Devil's Third was intended to launch a huge multimedia franchise with anime and manga tie-ins, so presumably to give the tie-ins more material to work with, the game is loaded down with convoluted lore that has jack shit to do with anything. Cutscenes are so full of useless details that I honestly had trouble remembering anything that happened in the story, and it was only when I laid out this script that I realized nothing's happened for the last 4 levels. You literally spend 4 missions doing nothing but search anonymous locations for a lead on Sod's headquarters, repeatedly finding nothing, and getting another dump truck of useless lore that'll never be mentioned again at the end of each stage. Go to airfield, find nothing, but learn all about shouty African terrorist guy who's never mentioned again. Go to hospital, find nothing, but learn all about that super soldier serum that has dick to do with the plot. Go to prison, find nothing, but learn all about the island that you've been exploding. The game has no actual plot beyond a super vague kill bad guys, and it doesn't even seem to have a main villain. The main characters keep talking about Big Mouse like he's king hot shit of Sod and the main bad guy, seemingly unaware that Big Mouse is already dead. It's like we killed the main villain at the start of the game and the game just didn't notice, so the rest of the game just spins its wheels hyping up how awesome that dead guy was. Level 7, we finally start heading to Sod's headquarters. It begins with a driving section where the turning controls are super stiff, you get stuck on every slight surface and knocked around like your vehicle has no mass, the camera constantly shakes in a concerted effort to make you puke, and a bridge explodes while your truck just kind of floats off a cliff because you weren't perfectly lined up with the exit. Level 7 also introduces invisible enemies because screw it, we're Metal Gear now. This level has 2 separate points where 4 of the armored enemies you can barely fight spawn in at once. The first is in this open field where 4 chain gun guys march on you. After several failed attempts to both find enough ammo and land enough hits to kill these absurd damage sponges, I realized that those boring ass Marines who've been following me around all game can't die. So I just hid in the corner and let my AI partners kill the armored enemies for me, tanking thousands of bullets to the face and exploding out gallons of blood and spinal fluids like real champs. And this plan worked. You guys are doing great! Keep it up! This level ends with what I dubbed in my footage as the bullshit fight. You make your way down a tight hallway fighting dug-in invisible enemies and getting ambushed by 2 armored melee dudes. Not only are they still immune to everything I throw at them but explosives, but now you're in a tight environment with no room to maneuver around them. And at the end of this tedious, annoying-ass fight, the game spawns 2 more melee armored enemies and 2 armored chain gun enemies backing them up. Now I'm fresh out of explosives and drowning in 4 enemies who curb stomp you in seconds that shrug off everything I throw at them. Oh, and there's no checkpoint here, so I had to redo this annoying-ass hallway fight multiple times. I ended up running in circles near my allies doing the chicken dance, hoping that I could survive long enough for them to kill these douchebags for me, and eventually it worked. At the end of this level, the hero's chopper is shot down, so Ivan escapes in a World War II plane while the Marines sacrifice themselves to cover his escape. Well, that sucks. Now I need to figure out how you fight the armored bastards without my meat shields on hand. So out of nowhere and with 1 hour left in the game, Ivan and the other characters start talking about a completely new character who's never been mentioned named Isaac Kumano. He's the leader of Sod and he wants to nuke every major government on Earth so he can take over the world. Oh good, they finally noticed that there was no main villain or plot. Ivan goes to invade Kumano's base and he receives backup from veterans flying World War II planes. Why? Well, all other military vehicles were disabled by the global EMP, of course. This is the one and only time that the EMP from the game's opening is ever mentioned in the entire game. So they'd have an excuse to stick in a World War II level where you run around stopping anti-aircraft turrets. Ah, shit! You get locked in a tight room with one of the armored melee bastards and now I have to figure out how they work. Nope. That didn't do anything. That did jack. Okay. So here's how you fight the armored guy. You land a heavy attack and that sort of stuns them for a few seconds so you can land some follow-up hits. Try that anywhere else and you get killed. The standalone heavy attack is too slow and gets interrupted by enemies. But sure, you're just supposed to figure out that here it's the only attack that does shit. Oh, what? Did you see that? New enemies literally teleported into the level and shot me dead instantaneously! You sack of cheating bastard! And the boss of the World War II stage is a massive zombie with a jetpack and rocket launchers. I must have missed that day in history class. Ivan and some more military dudes who just spawned out of nowhere storm Sod's base. This level sends an armored bastard at you every few seconds because they couldn't think of another way to increase the difficulty. Luckily I have new meat shields to kill the armored guys for me, and luckily the armored enemies are dumb as soup. You know, this is exactly how Batman defeated Azrael in Night's End. He just hid in a corner that his bulky armor couldn't fit inside. Oh, come on, fat ass, you can get me through here. I'm here! Kill me! I'm here! Brilliant! Oh, and the whole use a heavy attack to stun strategy that wrecked the armored guy last stage, it doesn't work anymore. I wonder if that one guy had to be specially rigged to make him beatable. Ivan runs into Isaac's second-in-command, a lady with a skin-tight, flesh-colored catsuit who can turn invisible. Bitch in the shell here is freaking annoying. Again, your attacks phase through her with no feedback. Again, she can kill you in one hit with no wind-up. Every now and then she just whips out 2 guns and shoots you to death before you can react, and trying to hit her gets you killed by an instantaneous counterattack. The only way I could kill her was to run away, and every now and then try a heavy attack that stuns her, and even that barely works. It turns out that Isaac Kumano is Ivan's surrogate dad who trained him until Ivan left. It turns out Bitch in the Shell here is Ivan's surrogate sister and they have an intense rivalry. And it also turns out that Kumano had Ivan's parents killed because they screwed up a mission. None of this has anything to do with anything that's happened the rest of the game, and this is the first mention of Ivan's parents ever. They're desperately cramming in backstory for the final boss 5 minutes before you fight him because they forgot to write an actual plot. Kumano is too roided out to fight, so Ivan somehow goes Super Saiyan and you fight him in an alternate dimension. Yeah, they don't even try to explain what's going on here. I just know that Kumano is easy to kill, and that makes me happy. Kumano dies, Ivan stops the nukes, Bitch in the Shell comes back and tries to shoot Ivan, but C4 stops her. Yeah, this chick is a long story. I've been putting off talking about C4 because she's a good encapsulation of how obsessed the game is with convoluted and pointless lore. C4 is the last member of Ivan's old SOD team. She shows up throughout the game in little cameos and teases like they're setting up a mystery of who she's working for. She snipes at Ivan a few times. At one point you see her escaping a base in a helicopter that blows up. There are flashbacks, I think, to Ivan training her to shoot. She leads Ivan to the hospital. She helped Ivan escape SOD back when he first quit. Ivan thought that she was dead. She's integral to the production of the super soldier serum because she has a special disorder, and she gets several backstory tidbits in the loading screens. Apparently she has some kind of genetic thing that prevents her face from aging, and she's named C4 after the plastic explosive. You know, in case you thought she was named C4 after the space-in battleship. They spend the entire game teasing and hyping up this character, and here at the climax she finally does something. What does C4 do after all that build-up? A villain that we've already taken out comes out and shoots Ivan, who could have easily stopped her alone, and C4 blocks the bullet. That's it. This game is so obsessed with lore and pointless, meaningless background details that they spend the entire game hyping up a character who does jack shit friggin' nothing! Bitch in the Shell is incinerated out of nowhere, C4 survives, and Ivan says that it's not over. Roll credits.
This isn't over.
What a shit ending! There's no sense of triumph or accomplishment, just an "it's not over" trying to sound badass. In the middle of the credits, there's a tease for a sequel that, if there's a god above, will never happen. It turns out that SOD is somehow still not dead, and they were colluding with the White House the entire time! So a game released in 2015 has a sequel hook where Russian villains are colluding with a white male American president. I hate this fucking game! And just to tempt fate some more, there's a tag after the credits where Itagaki thanks his fans for waiting for and supporting the game. Yeah, ask how many of them thought the wait was worth it. Devil's Third is an infuriating mess. The gun combat is slow, boring, and tedious. The melee combat is broken. The story is mostly filler with no plot or villain until the last 2 levels, and the disconnect between a cartoony script and realistic direction and action makes the whole thing just play off as incredibly stupid and not in a fun way. In the name of fairness, a lot of people said the game's online multiplayer was really good, but the developer being sued out of business meant the online mode was shut down 14 months after launch, leaving Devil's Third pretty much useless to everyone involved. I don't know if Itagaki is the kind of guy who needs bosses and supervisors to rein in his ideas and keep him on task, or what happened during development, but Devil's Third has no idea what it's trying to be. 1 part anime, 1 part Resident Evil, 1 part World War II shooter, 5 parts COD clone, and all parts total bullshit. I'm glad some people can enjoy it ironically, and I hope Itagaki's fans got their fill from the game, but even with the Wii U's limited library, I never want to play this dog shit again.